Remember the future we were promised? Jetpacks, robot maids, meals in a pill? Yeah, about that. Today, we're diving into 12 retro products that swore they'd change everything. Some were bold, some were bizarre, and some? Well, they should have never made it past the drawing board. From the 1950s to the early 90s, America was in a frenzy of innovation. TV commercials promised breakthroughs, magazines advertised miracle gadgets, and every kid wanted the latest contraption that looked like it came straight out of the Jetsons. But not everything turned out quite as planned. These are the products that had big dreams and even bigger crashes. 1. The 8-track tape, a revolution that skipped. It was supposed to be the future of music. Pop it in, no rewinding needed. The 8-track promised convenience like never before. But here's the catch. It was bulky, prone to jamming, and halfway through your favorite song, click. It switched tracks mid-tune. Nothing killed the vibe faster. Cassette tapes came in swinging. Smaller, rewritable, and they didn't interrupt Led Zeppelin halfway through Stairway to Heaven. At the time, car manufacturers and music companies bet big on 8-tracks. But consumers quickly soured on the clunky format, and by the early 80s, they were being phased out faster than disco. Collectors today still search for vintage 8-track players, not because they work well, but because they represent a very specific moment in American music history, when promise outpaced practicality. In hindsight, the 8-track's failure paved the way for more compact and user-friendly innovations. It showed the world that portability and flexibility would win out over gimmicks. It also taught companies that sometimes the race isn't about the first one to launch. It's about the one that listens to how people actually use their tech. 2. The Flowbee, the hair-cutting vacuum. Save hundreds on haircuts, they said. Do it at home. The Flowbee attached to your vacuum and lets you cut your own hair. But unless you had surgeon-level precision, you ended up looking like someone trimmed your hair with a weed whacker. Infomercials made it look so easy. In real life, kids were traumatized, dads were banned from the bathroom, and barbers stayed in business. It gained a cult following during lockdowns, but even then, most people realized some things are better left to the professionals. The Flowbee became the go-to gag gift at white elephant parties, a symbol of DIY gone wrong, but also a quirky reminder of a time when we thought we could solve any problem with a vacuum cleaner. Even today, it represents a kind of weird optimism, the belief that technology could turn anyone into a home barber. But all it really did was create a generation of lopsided bangs, uneven fades, and family photos we'd all like to forget. 3. The Sinclair C5, the plastic electric dream. The 1985 Sinclair C5 was a tiny electric trike that looked like a cross between a golf cart and a toboggan. It promised to revolutionize urban transport, but with a top speed of 15 miles per hour, no weather protection, and zero crash safety, it was less transportation revolution and more rolling joke. Also, you sat so low that drivers couldn't see you. Good luck surviving a four-way intersection. It became a punchline in British media and a case study in how not to launch a personal vehicle. Even worse, it launched into a world that wasn't quite ready for electric transport. The infrastructure didn't exist. The roads weren't friendly, and the public just wasn't sold on the idea of commuting inside a glorified plastic sled. Despite its failure, the C5 is now a cult classic. Tech museums showcase it as an ambitious leap ahead of its time. And with the rise of e-scooters and EVs today, it's fair to say Sinclair's vision wasn't wrong, just premature, poorly executed, and way too goofy-looking. 4. Betamax, better than VHS but still lost. Betamax had sharper video and better sound. Tech-wise, it beat VHS. But Sony made one mistake: shorter recording time. Consumers chose convenience over quality. VHS gave them more minutes per tape, and in the format war, minutes mattered. By the 90s, Betamax was history, but die-hard fans still argue it was robbed. Even so, the format war taught tech companies a hard lesson. Being first and best doesn't always mean winning. Sony also restricted licensing for Betamax, limiting its market reach. Meanwhile, VHS was picked up by multiple manufacturers, flooding the shelves and beating Betamax with sheer volume. A classic case of good tech, bad strategy. Eventually, Betamax became a forgotten footnote, but its legacy lives on in how we view home media. It's a reminder that better specs don't matter if nobody can afford or even access the product. 5. Clairol touch of yogurt shampoo, dairy disaster. In the 70s, natural was in. So Clairol thought, why not combine yogurt with shampoo? What could go wrong? Turns out, putting dairy on your head isn't as refreshing as it sounds. People were confused. Some thought it was edible. Some actually ate it. The scent didn't help either. Spoiled milk and wet dog aren't exactly what you want in a hair product. It was quickly pulled from shelves, but not before becoming the cautionary tale of trying too hard to ride a trend. The packaging didn't help either. It looked more like a yogurt parfait than a personal care item. Shoppers mistook it for food, and product reviewers ridiculed it in droves. It was a marketing disaster wrapped in a plastic bottle. It goes down in history as one of those classic cases where marketers got so caught up in trends that they forgot about, well, common sense. It's an example still cited in advertising circles of what happens when you let novelty override logic. 6. New Coke, the cola catastrophe. Ah yes, the classic blunder. In 1985, Coca-Cola tried to reinvent itself. Sweeter, smoother, a new formula for a new generation. Problem was, nobody asked for it. Americans were furious. Protests broke out. People hoarded the original Coke. Just 3 months later, Coca-Cola brought back the old formula, now labeled Coca-Cola Classic. Lesson? Don't mess with a good thing. The backlash was so intense, it's still studied in marketing classes as a masterclass in brand loyalty and how to nearly ruin it. Even Coca-Cola executives admitted they underestimated just how attached people were to the original taste. The emotional connection to that red can ran deeper than flavor. It was tied to memories, family gatherings, and Americana itself. New Coke wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal. 7. Laserdisc. Big, beautiful, and completely impractical. Laserdiscs looked like giant CDs and offered crystal-clear video. Ahead of their time, really. But they were huge, like vinyl record huge. Players were expensive, and the discs themselves couldn't store an entire movie without flipping. You had to get up, turn it over, and resume. Imagine doing that during a suspense scene. No thanks. Even though cinephiles loved the quality, the bulk and cost made it a niche item that never broke into the mainstream. Retailers struggled to sell them. Parents didn't want another massive machine cluttering the living room. And by the time Laserdisc had a chance to gain momentum, DVDs swept in with better storage, smaller size, and no need to interrupt a movie for a manual disc flip. Ironically, the technology behind Laserdisc laid the groundwork for modern digital media. But at the time, it was like bringing a bazooka to a water balloon fight. 8. The Apple Newton, the OG iFlop. Long before the iPhone, there was the Newton, a personal digital assistant. Handwriting recognition, notes, contacts, revolutionary. Except, the handwriting feature barely worked. It misread nearly everything. Even your grocery list looked like ancient code. Add a steep price tag and bulkiness, and Newton was doomed. But it paved the way for the Palm Pilot, the BlackBerry, and eventually, Steve Jobs' comeback with the iPhone. Despite its flaws, Newton was ahead of its time. Sometimes being too early is just as bad as being wrong. The Newton earned praise from tech enthusiasts, but was mocked in pop culture. Even The Simpsons made fun of its poor handwriting recognition. Still, it sparked ideas that would evolve into the smartphone, proof that even a failure can lay the first brick in a future empire. 9. The Segway, the future of walking, sort of. When the Segway launched, it was hyped as the thing that would replace walking. Seriously, Inventors said cities would be redesigned around it. Everyone would glide through the future. But it never caught on. Too expensive, too geeky, and you still looked ridiculous on one. It found a niche with mall cops and tourists, but the revolution never rolled in. Ultimately, the Segway was a solution in search of a problem, and most people decided walking worked just fine. Its failure wasn't about function, it was about image. The average person didn't want to zoom down the sidewalk looking like a sci-fi traffic cone. Segway's downfall showed that public perception can be just as important as engineering. 10. Microsoft's Zune, the iPod killer. That wasn't Microsoft, saw Apple dominating with the iPod and said, "We can do that too." Enter the Zune. It had some cool features like sharing songs. Except the person had to have a Zune too. And nobody did. The design was clunky, the marketing weak. And by the time people noticed the Zune, Apple had already moved on. It showed that even a tech giant like Microsoft could fumble when it chased trends instead of setting them. Zune fans still defend it. Some say it had better sound quality or a more robust interface, but in a world where everyone was already syncing their lives to iTunes, the Zune felt like an outsider trying to crash the party without knowing the password. 11. The Dvorak keyboard, the layout that couldn't be designed to be more efficient than QWERTY. The Dvorak layout rearranged keys for faster typing. But retraining your brain? Not easy, especially when every public computer still used QWERTY. People gave up quickly, and the keyboard revolution died in its ergonomic tracks. To this day, it's used by a tiny minority of dedicated typists, but it never even scratched QWERTY's dominance. It didn't help that there were no mainstream typing tutorials, schools didn't teach it, and office workers weren't about to relearn how to do their jobs. Efficiency couldn't beat comfort, and so the Dvorak keyboard became a relic of what could have been. 12. The DeLorean, stainless steel cool, engineered chaos. Thanks to Back to the Future, the DeLorean is a legend, but in real life, a nightmare. The gull-wing doors were neat but jammed easily. The engine was underpowered. And build quality? Let's just say Doc Brown had better luck with time travel than owners did with repairs. It looked futuristic but drove like a brick. Despite everything, it remains a cultural icon, proof that sometimes looking cool is all it takes to make history. Production was plagued with delays, cost overruns, and quality control issues. The stainless steel body looked sharp, but was expensive and difficult to maintain. Still, car lovers and movie buffs alike can't help but admire the DeLorean, not for what it was, but for what it symbolized: ambition, imagination, and a bit of 1980s magic. What do all these products have in common? Big promises, big dreams, and a market that just wasn't ready or interested. They remind us of a time when innovation meant risk, when companies took bold shots, sometimes missing the mark spectacularly. But even the flops left a mark. Some paved the way for future successes, others became nostalgic icons, and some just make us laugh at what we once believed would be the next big thing. What retro product do you remember buying into?